Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Ryan returned from a quiet week off-grid, he expected peace. What he found was a for sale sign on his land, a changed lock, and a war he never asked for. What begins as HOA harassment quickly spirals into deception, stolen documents, and a courtroom showdown for the ages. You know those moments when you feel like the universe is testing your patience just for sport? That's how my Tuesday began, only I didn't know it yet. I'd just gotten back from a solo trip to the Northern Sierras. A week off-grid, no emails, no HOA pamphlets slipped under my windshield wipers, just me, a beat-up thermos, and a fly rod. Exactly how I like it. No rules, no meetings, no one asking if I'd considered community landscape cohesion. Before I left, I had one final visit from the Queen herself, Karen Bradshaw, president of the Sunset Pines Homeowners Association, and, unofficially, the most persistent woman I've ever met. She had this way of showing up exactly 5 minutes after I started a project, trenching for my septic upgrade, clearing fallen branches, or once, memorably, pouring concrete for a backup generator pad. Somehow, she always had a clipboard and an unsolicited opinion. "Ryan," she'd chirp with that cloying smile and pastel-colored blazer, "we at the HOA feel like your property would really benefit from some collective oversight. You know, security patrols, architectural reviews, themed mailboxes." I had to stop her right there. "Karen," I said, "I don't need patrols. My mailbox works just fine, and I like choosing what color I paint my own damn shed." But she'd just nod, unaffected, already flipping to a laminated brochure titled, "Why HOA Membership Means Harmony." "Just think about it," she'd say. "We've made room in the next quarterly vote. You'd be a provisional member for the first 6 months." Every time, same conversation. She made it sound like she was inviting me to an exclusive spa retreat instead of a suburban regulatory regime. My answer every single time was a polite but unshakable no. I wasn't within their jurisdiction. My land wasn't part of their plat. The county records proved it. Yet Karen treated that as more of a speed bump than a wall. So I left town. Thought maybe a little distance would cool her jets. A few days without my non-conforming perimeter fencing might finally give her someone else to hound. And then I came back. I pulled off the county road, turned onto my private gravel drive, and slammed the brakes so hard my coffee spilled. There, staked into the earth just outside my split-rail fence, were not one, not two, but 3 professionally printed signs. Each bright white with bold blue letters. "For sale. Inquire at Sunset Pines HOA office." Complete with the HOA's logo, a contact number, and, I swear to God, a QR code. I blinked. I honestly thought I'd taken a wrong turn, except I hadn't. That was my tree line, my fencing, my tire marks, and those were definitely not my signs. The bad feeling in my gut bloomed into something much darker the second I reached the gate and got out of the truck. I walked up to the service cabin, my tool station and supply room while I worked on the foundation for the main house. The deadbolt had been changed. My key didn't even enter the cylinder. Tried the side door. Same result. No signs of forced entry. Just replaced. And taped to the front door was a flyer in HOA blue. "Lock replaced for security reasons. For access. Contact Sunset Pines HOA." I stood there in stunned silence, keys dangling from my hand like a bad punchline. I didn't know whether to laugh or start shouting at the hills. Karen hadn't just overstepped. She'd vaulted. She'd charged past aggressive persuasion into a realm I didn't even think existed outside of bad TV dramas and Reddit horror stories. My land, my cabin, my gate, and someone else's phone number plastered across it. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit until then. This wasn't some quirky neighbor trying too hard to build a tight-knit community. This was a takeover. I wish I could say I handled it like a calm, collected adult. Truth is, I stood on my own porch for a good 2 minutes trying to figure out if I was hallucinating or just in the middle of some HOA-themed prank show. But no cameras popped out, and no hidden host leapt from the bushes yelling, "Gotcha!" Once the adrenaline faded, reality hit me in the teeth. My tools, blueprints, and legal documents, including the original deed to the land, were inside that cabin, and I couldn't get in. That's when I called a locksmith. The guy's name was Daryl, and he showed up 20 minutes later in a dented white van with a sticker that read, "Daryl's Lock and Key. We respect privacy and property lines." God bless this man. Problem with a tenant? He asked, stepping out and eyeing the sign on the door. Nope, I said. Problem with a rogue HOA who thinks they can claim land through sheer audacity. Daryl chuckled. Oh, one of those. I had a case last month where a condo board changed the locks on a guy's garage because his kayak wasn't the right shade of blue. He went to work, and 5 minutes later, the deadbolt popped open. The moment I stepped inside, my heart sank. The place wasn't trashed, but something felt off. Some of my paperwork, the folder with title documents, survey maps, and tax records, was missing from the shelf where I always kept it. Nothing else was stolen, just those. I checked my backup files on the laptop. Password changed. Now, I was pissed. I called the sheriff's office. 2 patrol cars arrived within an hour. Officer Stacy Langley took my statement. She was sharp, no nonsense, and refreshingly unimpressed with HOA drama. I explained everything. The signs, the changed locks, the missing documents, the fact that this wasn't even an HOA-controlled parcel. She took photos of the signs, my ID, and my purchase documents. Then she pulled out her tablet and accessed the county property registry. Yep, she said, scrolling. You're the registered owner, no liens, no easements, no HOA jurisdiction. This land is yours. Free and clear. She gave a low whistle as she looked back at the sign out front. This is a whole new level of bold. Do you know who did this? Oh, I said, crossing my arms. I've got a pretty good idea. She raised an eyebrow. You want to press charges? Not yet, I said, jaw tight. First, I'm going to pay a visit to the Sunset Pines Welcome Center. Stacy smirked. If it were me, I'd bring popcorn. She left me with a printed incident report and her direct line. I thanked Daryl, slipped him a tip, and stood in my doorway with the sign still flapping in the wind down the road. My blood was boiling, but my mind was clear. This wasn't going to be a neighborly talk anymore. This was going to be war, and I was done playing defense. I didn't knock when I walked into the Sunset Pines HOA office. I kicked the damn door open so hard, the little bell above it smacked the wall and kept ringing like it didn't know how to stop. Heads turned. 2 receptionists froze like I'd brought a flamethrower. I didn't yell, not yet, but the look on my face must have said enough. The lobby was decorated like a dentist's office that had read too many Better Homes and Gardens issues, fake ficus, motivational posters about community unity, and a miniature water fountain trickling like it was trying to soothe your soul before they sent you a violation notice for your window blinds. Then she walked out. Karen Bradshaw, hair like a cotton ball with vengeance, matching blazer and skirt in HOA navy, clipboard under one arm, iced coffee in the other, and a smile, practiced, polite, and about as warm as a frozen parking ticket. Well, Mr. Miller, she said, voice sweet and syrupy. We've been expecting you. I didn't sit. Let's get this straight, Karen. You changed the locks on my building. You posted signs on my property saying it was for sale. You've got about 10 seconds to explain what the hell you were thinking before I have Officer Langley back here in cuffs and a warrant. Karen blinked. Once. Then she tilted her head slightly, like I was a child throwing a tantrum over bedtime. Ryan, please, she said, walking calmly behind the front desk. This isn't personal. We noticed that your parcel hadn't been confirmed in the last regional plat update. A simple oversight, really. So, the board and I voted to initiate temporary stewardship until ownership could be clarified. I barked. You stole my property, Karen. She raised a hand. Let's use less aggressive language. No one's stolen anything. We simply made a provisional decision to offer the lot to a buyer more in line with Sunset Pines standards. More in line. I stepped forward. Her smile flickered. You mean someone who agrees to your lawn height policies and mandatory mailbox themes? Someone who won't build a home without your committee picking the roof tiles? Karen sipped her drink like we were chatting about brunch reservations. We had a lovely young couple interested. They were ready to place an offer. You should be grateful. They even planned to keep the original trees. Imagine that. You forged a listing. You broke into my building. You removed my documents. And you're standing here smiling like this is some community bake sale. Now her eyes hardened. The mask slipped, just for a second. She set her coffee down. Let's not pretend your little outpost adds anything to the neighborhood, she said flatly. Your property is an eyesore, a liability. We are maintaining a standard, Ryan. And whether or not you legally fall under our umbrella, you're surrounded by it. Integration is inevitable. I stared at her. For a moment, words failed me, and then I laughed, not a polite laugh. A sharp, bitter, chest-deep laugh that probably echoed through their feng shui planned conference room. "You just declared war," I said, turning toward the door. "Hope you enjoyed the prelude, because Act 1 starts now. If I was going to fight this war, I needed ammo, and I wasn't going to settle for just angry words and sarcastic signs. No. I was going to bring receipts, recordings, records, and rain down hell the HOA had never seen before, because what Karen didn't realize was that I don't bluff. I dig. First stop was my attorney, Joanna Brown. Razor sharp, permanently unimpressed, and the kind of woman who wore heels like weapons. When I told her the full story, she blinked once, then asked, "Do you want blood or just financial ruin?" I said, "Why not both?" She smirked. We started with a public records request. Property registry, county plat maps, tax assessments. Everything confirmed what we already knew. I owned my land outright. No liens, no covenants, no homeowners association jurisdiction. But here's where it got dark. Sunset Pines had recently submitted amended boundary suggestions to the county for a future neighborhood cohesion plan. And guess what mysterious little parcel showed up within their proposed borders? Mine. They labeled it Parcel Z, like some kind of military test site, and marked it as unclaimed. Joanna leaned over the document, lips tight. "This is an intentional reclassification attempt. It's paperwork sabotage." And then it got worse. We tracked down the lovely young couple Karen had mentioned, a pair of first-time homebuyers who had contacted the HOA after seeing my property listed in one of their community newsletters. They were eager, polite, and more than willing to talk once I explained what was happening. I'll never forget the voicemail they shared with us. Karen's voice, crisp and confident. "Yes, the lot's technically outside the current plan, but we've received verbal confirmation it will be absorbed. The owner's unclear. It's a bureaucratic mess. But if you move quickly, the board is prepared to authorize a significant discount for early commitment. Think of it as a stewardship incentive." A stewardship incentive. I nearly threw my phone at the wall. This wasn't overreach. This was fraud, carefully worded but unmistakable. HOA wasn't just meddling, they were marketing my property. They'd made a deal behind my back and tried to erase me with a smile, but I wasn't done yet. I reviewed my own security footage, the motion-activated cameras at the gate, and inside the cabin. One file caught a figure in an HOA-branded polo unlocking the gate with bolt cutters. Another showed Karen herself walking up to my cabin with two other board members, clipboard in hand, taking photos of my blueprints and rummaging through my files. One even laughed and said, "Maybe we'll get lucky and he just never comes back." Joanna watched the footage in silence. When it ended, she closed her laptop and looked at me square in the eye. "We're going to bury them." I nodded, but I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Cold. Karen didn't just cross a line. She took a bulldozer to it, rewrote the map, and tried to sell the rubble. Now it was time for someone to remind her what happens when you try to evict a man from his own land. I've always believed that courtrooms have their own gravity. The air feels heavier, like the walls are watching. Like justice is a living thing, coiled in the rafters, waiting to drop. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside the county courthouse with my tie crooked, coffee too hot, and a manila folder in my hand that could reduce an entire HOA board to rubble. Beside me, Joanna adjusted her glasses with surgical precision. She looked more like a hawk than a lawyer, ready to swoop in and shred Karen's carefully curated facade of professionalism. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Residents from Sunset Pines filled the benches. Most looked confused, some curious, but a few looked embarrassed, like maybe, just maybe, they'd started to realize who they had really put in charge. And then came Karen. She walked in like a politician at a press conference, chin high, steps deliberate, flanked by two defense attorneys in slick charcoal suits. Her blazer was perfect, makeup flawless, but her eyes darted too much. Her smile twitched at the edges. She wasn't here to win. She was here to survive. The judge, a broad-shouldered man with reading glasses halfway down his nose, opened the session with calm authority. Case 1328, Miller v. Sunset Pines HOA. And then it began. Joanna opened with fire, a clear statement. This was not a zoning misunderstanding or a civil miscommunication. This was attempted property theft under the mask of bureaucracy. She showed the court county maps, original and altered, the forged Parcel Z designation, the unauthorized listing emails, voicemails from Karen to the buyers, and finally, the security footage. When the projector flickered to life and showed Karen and her board members breaking into my cabin like smug burglars at a Sunday brunch, the room went silent. Karen paled. One of her attorneys leaned over and whispered something with visible panic. She didn't blink. She just stared at the screen like maybe if she didn't move, it would all vanish. But the worst came next, the buyer's testimony. The young couple took the stand and explained in excruciating detail how Karen had personally assured them the land was being transitioned into HOA control and that the current owner was uncooperative but not a concern. When the husband looked over at me and apologized from the witness box, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep it together. Then it was Karen's turn. She took the stand with practiced grace, but it didn't last long. Under cross-examination, her voice started to crack. First, she denied forging anything. It was a miscommunication with our junior administrator. Then she blamed the board. They advised me the lot was unclaimed. But when Joanna pulled out an internal HOA email with Karen's signature authorizing the lock change and calling me a future obstacle to community integrity, her mask shattered. I was trying to preserve property values, she snapped, her voice shrill. Do you know what happens when you let rogue properties rot outside the association? No one wants to buy near uncertainty. So you tried to erase me? I said aloud from my seat, to sell my land out from under me like I was roadkill. Karen looked at me, and I saw it. That flicker of realization. The understanding that her empire, built on petty rules and paper arrogance, was collapsing. I made a mistake, she said finally, voice low. The judge leaned forward. A mistake is forgetting to send a notice. You changed locks, altered public documents, and misrepresented ownership to potential buyers. That's not a mistake. That's fraud. And then came the sentence. The court ruled in my favor on all counts. For $20,000 in damages, including punitive, legal fees, and lost value due to the false listing, HOA placed under independent oversight for 1 year. And Karen Bradshaw was convicted of fraud, trespassing, and falsification of property records. She was sentenced to 12 months in county jail, plus 3 years of probation and a permanent ban from serving on any administrative board. As the gavel came down, the silence in the room was deafening. Karen sat frozen, eyes wide, face drained of color. Her hands trembled as the bailiff approached. One of her attorneys reached to steady her, but she pulled away. When they led her out in cuffs, she didn't speak, didn't scream. Just walked like someone who had finally run out of excuses. And me? I stood tall. Not because I won, but because justice, real, honest justice, had finally punched back. You ever feel the kind of silence that comes after a thunderstorm? The one where the air still smells like ozone and everything's dripping, but still. That was my land in the weeks after the verdict. Still scarred, still scraped, but finally mine again, without anyone pretending otherwise. The HOA, or what was left of it, didn't even try to appeal. After the ruling, Sunset Pines got slapped with court-ordered external management for 12 months, which meant their little empire of citations and quarterly inspections was now being run by a bored civil administrator from the county named Ed, who looked like he'd rather be fixing potholes. He walked around with a clipboard for show, then waved off anyone who tried to complain about mailbox colors. Most of the board resigned quietly. One guy posted in the community forum that he'd had no idea things had gone so far. I didn't bother commenting. What could I say? Hey buddy, you signed the parcel theft memo right next to Karen's smiley face. As for the residents, well, let's just say the mood shifted. People still waved when they saw me at the hardware store, but now there was a pause. The kind of pause you give someone who's either a local legend or recently fought a bear and won. Maybe both. And then there was Karen. 3 months after the sentencing, I was getting gas just off the highway when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned, and there she was, standing next to a dented compact car, wearing a Bob's Pizza and Subs baseball cap, a red delivery shirt, and the unmistakable expression of a person who'd swallowed their pride, but it was coming back up. She froze. I raised an eyebrow. "Ryan," she said flatly. "Karen," I replied. "Didn't realize Pizza Bob required background checks." She forced a thin smile. It's temporary. Sure, I said, eyes flicking to the stack of insulated bags in her passenger seat. Rehabilitative pizza work. Very noble. She looked like she wanted to bite something, preferably me. But instead, she just nodded and got back in the car, adjusting her hat like it might cover the humiliation. And you know what? I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't gloat. Watching her drive off with a Domino's competitor logo on her chest was enough. She'd been stripped of her kingdom, the meetings, the power trips, the clipboard authority, and now she was just someone else trying to outrun her own past with a minimum wage and extra cheese. Meanwhile, I finished fencing in my lot, installed cameras with infrared, hung a new sign on the gate that said, "Private property, not for sale, not for negotiation." Below it, a plaque. Attempted theft generously sponsored by the Sunset Pines HOA, now under adult supervision. Poetic? No. Satisfying? Absolutely. There's something oddly therapeutic about installing a 40-foot steel gate with your own two hands, especially when you know exactly who it's for. I had it custom-built, reinforced, motorized, pressure-sensored. If Fort Knox had a rural cousin with attitude, this was it. And across the top, in glossy black letters on a brushed metal plate, I mounted a message. Not for sale. Not for HOA. Not today, Karen. Below that, in tasteful serif font, was the plaque I'd been waiting months to install. This gate is dedicated to the memory of Karen Bradshaw's clipboard. Gone, but not missed. Some might say that was petty. I call it therapeutic landscaping. Of course, I didn't stop there. About 6 weeks after the dust settled, I took delivery of a drone. Not just any drone. This thing had a flight range of 3 miles, LED lighting, GPS tracking, and, most importantly, a built-in speaker system that could blast audio at 95 decibels. Every Saturday, at precisely noon, I launch it from the edge of my property. It rises slowly, like justice taking flight, and circles above Sunset Pines. At exactly 12:03, it plays a recording on loop. We took initiative to prepare the lot for sale. And this is standard procedure. Karen Bradshaw, Exhibit B, Circuit Court number 1328. Sometimes I mix in a dramatic music cue, like something from a courtroom TV drama. Occasionally, a chicken cluck, just for spice. At first, the HOA board, what's left of it, tried to complain. They sent a letter to the county claiming I was violating airspace. The county guy, Ed, the same one overseeing their external management, called me personally and said, if I had a nickel for every time I wanted to do the same thing, carry on. And so I do. By now, it's become kind of a Saturday tradition. Locals set their watches by it. Kids on bikes cheer when the drone launches. One guy on his porch salutes it with a can of Coors Light like it's the 4th of July. And me. I sit on my porch with a cold drink, a book, and the sweet, sweet satisfaction of knowing that truth doesn't just win. Sometimes it gets surround sound. Karen, to her credit, hasn't shown her face since that day at the gas station. Rumor has it she quit Pizza Bob's after a customer tipped her with a laminated HOA violation notice taped to a quarter. Last I heard, she's working remotely for a corporate compliance firm. Irony so sharp it could slice steel. They say she's in charge of process integrity. And you know what? Good. Let her sit at a desk 1,000 miles away, clicking through spreadsheets, while I sit on my porch in peace. No rules, no fines, no HOA, just me, my land, and the occasional air show of poetic justice flying overhead with a speaker system. Life, as they say, has never been more zoned correctly.